Blog Talk Radio.
Hello everyone, this is Laurie Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good morning. It is 7 o'clock here in the morning, Calgary, Alberta, and it's Friday, August the 13th. I'm glad to be here. This is One Child Abuse Survivor to Another. We're on for 30 minutes. It's a live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. And I'm just having some coffee, waking up. And glad to be able to continue doing these shows. The chat room is open. If anybody wants to sit in there, that's great. And just want to finish up talking about these articles that I found on the web on the internet regarding codependency and narcissism. I just want to take a brief look at narcissism because it is important for people who are codependent because you quite often tend to enter into relationships or side with narcissists, and there's reasons for it. And I think it's very interesting to take a look at it because it kind of goes hand in hand. And I never knew a whole lot about it, and had heard people say things in the past, oh, this person's a narcissist, or, this person's codependent, and I always thought I knew basically what it was about, but I didn't really know, exactly what it was all about. And so this has been a very educational couple of weeks for me, and I hope it's been helpful for everybody else. So this is what we're going to do this morning. And, I'm not a therapist, not a counselor, and I don't hold any certificates in those areas, just a private person doing my own shows. I've done over 300 shows now, and I say this on every show, but it's because somebody might just be listening one time and not listen to my archives, and then if I don't say this, then they might think I'm a qualified counselor or a therapist, right? And I'm not. So I just want everybody to know. And I'm just a private citizen and a survivor of child abuse, right? So I just wanted to be one more voice to add to everyone else's voices out there who are breaking the silence, who are speaking out, who are trying to get help and on their healing journey. And I'm just glad to be able to be another voice out there, just for people who might be feeling quite down and not able to talk to anybody. And I just want to be a voice for people to know that they're not alone and that they can get help, right? And that life is worth living, and we can do this. We can move at our own pace on our own healing journey, and we can get help. We can reach out. We can get a counselor, a therapist, a group support. That's what I like. I really like group support because I like safety in numbers. That's my thing. But there's help out there. So we shouldn't be sitting around suffering in silence, and that's what I did for 41 years. And, it's very sad. I'm so glad I broke the silence and reached out. And as I started reaching out, all these hands came back to me, and so many of these hands that came back to me, these people, they're my good friends, and they're very supportive, and they're here for me. So I try to encourage people to reach out. I never knew that this would happen, when I started reaching out about, it's getting close to a year now that I started actually reaching out and telling my story and going public with my story. I wrote a blog called Not So Fond Memories, Growing Up in an Abusive Home, and it was a public-facing blog, and I wanted people to read it. I wanted people to see what had happened to my family and to me, and I just didn't want to go to my grave with this information. I thought, man, somebody needs to know what happened to me, and somebody needs to know what happened to my family, right? And so it was very helpful for me to do that. The blog got published into my book, and that's because Donna Shear, president of Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, saw my blog, and she said that should be a book. It should be available for people all around the world to get a hold of. And I never thought of writing a book. It didn't occur to me, but she let me keep my blog as is, with a few, not any real changes, just some grammar corrections and whatnot. She let my voice speak out, so she did not change my story when it went to a book, A Life of Death, The Redemption. So I hope that you will pick that up, and all the proceeds are going to Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, and as I didn't want that money to pay my rent, you know what I mean? That book is way too important for me. It should go to help stop child abuse, right? So that's why I hope everybody will pick up a book, and all the proceeds are going directly to stop child abuse and to help prevent child abuse, right? So, yeah, that's why I'm doing these shows, and I just want to be one more voice. So I appreciate everybody who's tuning in. If you're a survivor, you got to be careful listening to any show like this because the topics can trigger you, right? And it could cause you to feel bad. And you want to make sure you're in a safe enough place that you're not going to hurt yourself or someone else, and that you're not going to have a miserable day because you listen to a show like this. You have to be quite aware of where you're at in your healing journey. And if you feel like the topics might bother you and it's just too much for you right now, you can always come back and listen to the archive at a later date when you're feeling stronger, right? And children, young people under the age of 18, I just ask that you have a parent or someone, an adult, listen to the show with you to make a decision whether or not you should be listening to the show. There's a lot of adult content on here. Abuse is not talked about a whole lot in mainstream society, as we know. It's always locked away behind the door and shoved under the carpet. No one wants to talk about it. No one wants to deal with it because abuse is ugly. Abuse is not pretty. Abuse is not comfortable, let me tell you. And for anybody who's survived child abuse, we know this firsthand, but people who have not, they might find the topic quite uncomfortable, and young people especially, if they've never heard of this type of thing. This information could be scary, so you want to make sure you have someone listen to the show who's older, an adult, who can help you decide whether you should be listening. And then they can help you if you have questions about what I'm talking about the material that I'm presenting this morning, right, or on any given show. So I'd appreciate it if you do that. So we'll get right into the show, and I wanted to just take a look at, or just today, a quick look at narcissism, because it does go along with codependency, and I think that's quite interesting. We were looking at codependency as people who, they don't want to make any decisions. They very much look for people who are, because of the way that they grew up, possibly in a dysfunctional family rules, abuse and neglect. Codependent people will look for people who to hang out with or to associate with in a relationship who are strong, have very they're very confident people. They make all the decisions. They're very powerful people. They quite often are in leadership roles, because these are people that have very high extreme egos. They're very much strong, powerful people. Codependents will quite often sort of drift to hang out with these people because they're looking for stability, right? I mean, people who have grown up around a lot of abuse and neglect, violence, family dysfunction and violence and whatnot, the chaotic lifestyle that children are forced to endure when they're young. You become an adult and all of a sudden you're looking for stability. You're looking for somebody who's strong and somebody who's going to make the decisions, who's going to take care of things, right? And I think this is so interesting to look at because narcissists are, themselves actually it's not a healthy way to live, right? And I think just by looking at what causes narcissism, we can see this, right? So this is what I'm looking at. It's called Winning Teams, www.winning-teams.com/narcissism, NARCISSISM _causes.html. And I'm just reading right from the webpage. It says, what causes narcissism? Narcissism is an egocentric behavior that occurs as a result of low self-esteem or feeling inferior in certain situations, caused by a gap between the ideal self, which is standards set by others, for example, parents, and the real self. And this results in threatening situations, real or perceived, which lead to anxiety, which in turn lead to the development of defense mechanisms to defend the individual's ego. So defense against a real or perceived threat involves denial and distortion of facts, projection, and splitting. And the hallmark of a narcissist is the development of a superiority complex as a result of feeling inferior. So this involves exaggerating his or her own achievements, putting down anyone that they perceive as a threat. And Jeremy Holmes described the narcissist's behavior as, sufficient unto himself. He becomes more and more self-absorbed, either hyper-vulnerable to every slight or brutally bullying his way to the top, whose twin peaks are his own self-aggrandizement and the denigration of others. So that's what this Jeremy Holmes said. It's they're just sufficient unto themselves. They're either really self-absorbed or hyper-vulnerable. If anybody tries to or says anything negatory about them, they bully their way to the top. They just, and it's all due to a low self-esteem, right? So I've actually known some narcissists, and now that I know what I'm looking at with the material, and really had to go back and think about it, these people, I haven't known very many narcissists, but I have known a couple that I can actually, really say, I bet you they are narcissists. I'm not a psychiatrist or a doctor, so I don't know if they are or not, but just their behaviors seem to be quite narcissistic, right? So narcissistic traits are quite common in adolescence, but this does not necessarily mean that a child will go on to become a narcissist. And research has found that the diagnosis of narcissism to be significantly more common among men. Faulty or inadequate parenting, for example, a lack of limit setting, is believed to be a major cause, and both permissive and authoritarian styles of parenting have been found to promote narcissistic symptoms. And the following parenting behaviors may result in a child becoming a narcissist in adulthood. And some of these, they list here: permissive parents who give excessive praise to the child, thus fostering an unrealistic view of themselves; overindulgence and spoiling by parents; failing to impose adequate discipline; and idealization of the child. So it says, a child who is spoiled or idealized will grow into an adult who expects this pattern to continue. Idealization may require the child to suppress their own self-expression to meet the desires of the parent and to gain their love and approval. To develop a realistic image of the self, the child must be provided with realistic information of discipline, and reasonable limits must be set by the parents as to what the child can and cannot do. And narcissists generally feel unprepared for adulthood, having been fostered with an unrealistic view of life. Narcissists are concerned with their image rather than their selves, and they often act to promote their image at the expense of their self. The self is a bipolar structure with the two extremes of an immature grandiosity at one end and a dependent over-idealization of other people at the opposite end. So it says healthy self-esteem is not formed if a child is not valued by his or her own self-worth, and usually the child is only used for the benefit of the parent's self-esteem and to further the parent's needs. So a narcissistic personality may be formed to make up for this lack of support and encouragement from parents. So this is very hard. I can imagine, like, just growing up like that. I try to put myself in other people's shoes, and try to think about what it'd be like to grow up in a family where, there's no proper boundaries set. There's no rules. It's like the child is just praised all the time for everything they do, even if their behavior is not good, they're still being applauded and praised, and then the child doesn't really grow up with any sense of self. They're just allowed to do whatever they want to do. They don't. I think that would be so difficult, really, to grow up like that as well. It just seems interesting to me to look at this stuff, because I've known a couple of people that I think fit into this category as far as, I know that they had low self-esteem, very low self-esteem, and yet they were narcissists. They would say, I'm superior, I'm better than everybody else, and like they would say this stuff, They would say, I'm the one who knows it all. What I say goes. They always have to be in charge and on top of everything. They can't have anybody kind of challenging them, like we were talking about yesterday. This friend of mine I know, but there's a couple other people that I know that sort of have these tendencies to be like narcissistic, and I might too. I just don't realize it. I try not to be that way, but you just never know, right? Unless somebody was to diagnose you, it's hard to say whether I do or not. I might not recognize some of these traits, right? See, that's the thing. But that's not good either, right? To go either way, to be codependent or narcissistic, right? They're both problems, and they're both unless they're dealt with, they cause a lot of problems within relationships, right? So it's kind of interesting to take a look at this, right? I see my dad as a bit of a narcissist, He used to say stuff like he's the only one that knew the Bible, him and God, that's it. And he would literally say this. He would say, I and God are the only ones that know the Bible, and the rest of the family would just be looking at him like, well, we already know that you're kind of like loopy, so we're not paying any attention to you. But he would say this stuff, and he believed it. So, I don't know, I kind of see my dad as a bit of a narcissist. He didn't want anything challenged, and that's why he was very abusive to my mom, and to his children, right? Especially when he was younger, like when he was a young man and they first got married, he was in control of it all, and so my mom didn't have a dime because my dad would control the money, and they didn't have enough food to eat, but my dad would be out buying furniture. So he would come home with a new couch, and the kids were starving, right? So my mom was just like, oh my God, because he wanted to have this perfect picture place that his friends and his buddies from the Air Force could come over and they'd be like, hey, your place is nice, your home is nice and all this. And here in the meantime, my mom had no money for food, no money for her own health care issues and no money for clothing for herself, right? It was all about just making this thing look so good, even though it wasn't. And I think that's what narcissists do. They make themselves look like they're just on top of things, and they have no problems, and everything is great. They're on top, and they're superior. In the meantime, they're just people who have very low self-esteem and are looking for approval. They're looking for love. They're looking for what they missed out on as a child, right? Looking for, especially I think, self-worth and approval. So it can go either way. A person can be, growing up in a dysfunctional home can go either be codependent or narcissistic, or maybe a little bit of both, And it's hard on children. It's very, very hard. And then they grow up with these issues as adults, and they have to try to get through life. If they don't get any help, then, they just continue on in it, right? So the natural narcissistic tendencies in children during adolescence can cause parents to behave either in an authoritarian way or in a permissive way towards their child. And this narcissistic vulnerability in adolescence is prone to embarrassment and shame, self-consciousness and shyness, and questions of self-esteem and self-worth. Healthy development of the self requires parenting that is demanding enough to encourage growth and independence, but not so demanding as to prevent growth through over-control. So both extremes, a lack of guidance, permissiveness, and authoritarianism, should be avoided to reduce the likelihood of the adolescent becoming a narcissist in adulthood. So yeah, parents need, have to be careful. They don't want to go too much either way, with being too permissive and just always letting the child do whatever they want, lack of guidance, right? Or authoritarianism, where you just control every movement the child makes, right? Neither one of those are good. So it's very, very hard on people. It says many people, including many psychologists, believe that narcissism is a product of our times and our system of values. In the Western world in particular, we are constantly bombarded by images of the ideal through the media. This may contribute to the rapid growth of narcissism in society. And in extreme cases, narcissism may be linked to invocation, whereby an individual's normal personality is replaced by another. And this psychological state, where the narcissist becomes almost entirely divorced from reality, can be a means of communicating with or getting close to a deity or spirit, which some believe can result in demonic possession. So that's interesting. I had my friend who I believe had very much narcissistic traits and behaviors, was always talking about stuff like that. And it's quite interesting because I think she knew she used to read a lot of stuff on narcissism herself, and she would say, I think I'm a narcissist, right? But I didn't quite know what it was all about, so I would just agree with her because I agreed with everything she said, because the relationship wouldn't have gone anywhere if I wouldn't have agreed with everything that she said, because you had to agree with what she said, because she was a narcissist, you know what I mean? Everything she said was right and everything she did was right, so I just used to be agreeable. But now it's interesting to take a look at this and see just exactly what it is. This website's really cool. I'll pop this into the chat, and they go on. There's all kinds of information on here that we probably won't get to, obviously, today. And I think we're going to leave this topic and we'll switch over to another topic next week. I've been looking at this, actually, we've been looking at this for 2 weeks now, codependency and whatnot. But I think that it's interesting to just take a brief look at this narcissism, right? They said that there's narcissists, if these people are evil, they can really cause a lot of damage. And so there's like Hitler, for instance, he was a narcissist, right? He had to be in control. Everything was in his control. And he said, this website here, they go on to talk about the fact that if all these people, like Hitler, Adolf Hitler, could not have killed however many people that he killed, however many Jews and however many Christians and all these other people that he killed, in different ethnic backgrounds and whatnot. He was just trying to kill anybody who wasn't Aryan, And so they said, had he not had support from codependents, he would have never been able to carry it out. But he had all these people following him who didn't care that what he was doing was right or wrong. They were just following him for whatever reason, right? And that's what narcissists do. They want total control. They don't want their authority challenged. They have to be in charge. It doesn't matter whether their behavior is good or bad. They have to be in charge. So whoever's around them, and if these people are codependents, which they quite often would be, that's the type of people the narcissist likes to have around them, because they praise them, they follow them, they do whatever they tell them to do. And codependents just go along with it, because codependents are looking for somebody to make the decisions, somebody to be strong and powerful and just do the job, because codependents are looking for stability of any kind, whether it's good stability or bad stability. So I mean, this is why this is very important for people to look at. Especially growing up in a dysfunctional home, right? Where I'd say that a lot of my family was very codependent. Now that I look at it, and the fact that later in life I know that I have tendencies to I guess just sort of veer towards people who are strong, who are powerful, who are making decisions and very stable, right? So whether it's bosses, I have a tendency to try to get into relationships with people who are in control, because I don't know why. That's the whole issue with codependency, right? Must be something that I just like. I'm almost just craving it from growing up in a chaotic home. And maybe it's just because I'm used to it, because my mom was my abuser, and I was always trying to be on her good side. And so it's like, if I feel like if I see the person, whoever in the room is in control and has the power, I will try to get on their good side. You know what I mean? And that's from being abused as a child, right? That has everything to do with it. Because I know, growing up with my mom, I love my mom very much, and I could not gain her love, and I could not gain any kind of nurturing from her, right? So I would do anything to try to get on her good side, and that if that meant taking sides against my dad or taking sides against somebody because she was, then I would. So whatever she was thinking and feeling, that's what I was thinking and feeling. So if she was mad at somebody, then I was going to back her up. I was mad at somebody. If she was unhappy about something, then I was unhappy about something, because I had to try to get into her mind and get into her whatever she was feeling that day, so I could try to avoid the abuse, right? And it often didn't work. It almost always didn't work, because my mom would still abuse me. But I thought that I was going to be able to eventually get somewhere with that. And I think that because I did that for so long as a child, so many years, I think that I carried that over into my adulthood. And so now the relationship that I have with my sweetheart, people thought it was funny, because they said, well, how did you meet him? And I said, well, he was my boss, right? And so we're still together very much today, right? The thing is I always tend to navigate to the people who are in charge, whether it's the boss and a lot of people think I'm brown-nosing, and actually what it is, it's a self-protection measure. I've had people in the past tell me stuff like, oh, you're just a brown-noser, you're just trying to get in with the boss, or you're just trying to do this, you're trying to do that. And it's actually no, I'm trying to as a young child, I built in these self-protection measures and these measures to protect myself. So basically I'm just doing what I was doing as a child. So I didn't even realize I was doing that until not a short time ago, when I realized, I was like, wow, I do almost always do that. So, and I had no idea I was even doing that. See, so that comes from so far back of trying to get into my mom's head so I could see how I could avoid taking the verbal assaults, the physical assaults, the hatred and the anger and the rage that she would put on me, at any given time. So, it was a lot of work to try to stay on top of what was going on in her head, you know what I mean? And so I think I just naturally do that now, right? But I think now that I recognize it, I know that I don't have to do that, and that it's so interesting, right? I mean, I can sort of see where I do these things and actually learn to change this behavior. So this is what we'll check this out. This narcissism, there's neurosis, paranoia, and narcissism. How to recognize a narcissist, narcissism in the workplace, narcissistic behavior at work, how to manage a narcissist, and what are the traits of a narcissist. I think we'll look at what are the traits of a narcissist. They talk about this here, what underlies narcissistic behavior. And it says, it is relatively easy to describe narcissistic behavior. We tend to look at the characteristics that we see in an attempt to understand the narcissist. And these are easy to see once we know what to look for. But these are the symptoms, not the causes. So we just talked about the causes. Right now we're going to look at the symptoms. Narcissistic symptoms display a pervasive pattern of grandiosity, a need for admiration, a lack of empathy that usually begins by early adulthood. And this pattern of grandiosity can be seen in the narcissist's views of their own uniqueness and abilities. Narcissists are beyond being self-centered, viewing themselves very highly and expecting others to view them the same. Their preoccupation with themselves and requiring constant attention and admiration from others disturbs their interpersonal relationships, especially with their lack of empathy. All narcissists view themselves very highly and expect others to view them the same. So they said here, a narcissist displays most, sometimes all, of the following traits: an obvious self-focus in interpersonal exchanges, problems in sustaining satisfying relationships, a lack of psychological awareness, difficulty with empathy, problems distinguishing the self from others, hypersensitivity to any slights or imagined insults, vulnerability to shame rather than guilt, haughty body language, flatters people who admire and affirm them, detests those who do not admire him or her, uses other people without considering the cost of that for them, and pretends to be more important than they are, right? Brags subtly but persistently and exaggerates their own achievements. And I've seen this in a few people that I know personally. Claims to be an expert about most things, cannot view the world from a perspective of another person, and denies remorse and gratitude. The above narcissistic behaviors are created to display a false image to the world, but these are just the symptoms. And underlying this false image are constant feelings of inferiority, inadequacy, and worthlessness. See, that's why I know, because this friend of mine was my best friend for 12 years or so, 13 years. And, she would tell me this stuff. She'd say, I'm actually just a false person because I have, I'm inferior. I have this self-worthlessness. And yet, look at me. I create this image of being so on top of things and so expert and so this and so that. So she recognized this stuff within herself. You know what I mean? And that's why we used to talk about this stuff. But the thing is I didn't quite know what caused it, and I didn't know a lot about the fact that a codependent would actually tend to navigate to a narcissist, right? So I think this is so interesting. It says here, it is because of these feelings, the inferiority, inadequacy, and worthlessness, that the narcissist develops a false image using the associated behaviors described above, and in a never-ending attempt to raise his or her self-esteem and feel good. So the subconscious desire to overcome these underlying feelings of inferiority, inadequacy, and worthlessness result in the mental conditions of paranoia and envy, which characterize the narcissistic condition. And paranoia and envy underlie all narcissistic behaviors. So isn't that interesting? I think that's so interesting. Paranoia and envy, it's like, wow, they're so paranoid and so envious, you know what I mean, that's underlies all of this stuff, right? And that's bad, it's just not good at all. It says the paranoia constantly felt by the narcissist means that he is or she is suspicious of virtually everyone they meet, and their fears being caught out, recognized for what they really are, or what they think they are, right? That is the inadequate being that lies beneath the false image, right? So that's my friend. She used to always be, what if people really knew that I was just a false person? And I used to tell her, you're not a false person. You're very good at what you do. And, of course, that would build her back up. And, she would be like, that's why I love you. You're my best friend, because I was always there to help her to recognize that she was very, very talented. She was very gifted, right? But the thing was, that's the truth. She was. But the thing is I think she had a lot of problems, you know what I mean? And I think that's why narcissists, if we have these traits, we do need to get help with this, because it's all underlying really from low self-esteem, low self-worth, inadequacy, right? And that stems from childhood, a lot of it. So we have to get help, right? If we feel that we're in this situation, we need to reach out and get some help. Well, that's what I have to say. So we have about a minute left. Thanks, everybody, for being here. I really appreciate it. We'll be back on. I'll be back on over the weekend. You can check my schedule. I'll be back on tonight with Dreamcatchers Talk Radio, and that Elizabeth Brawley will be joining me instead of Donna Shear tonight. And so, yeah, I hope everybody has a great day. If you need something, get a hold of me. I'll be around this weekend and next week as well on Blog Talk Radio, Facebook, and just make sure you have a great day. Reach out, get some help. I'm telling you, every show I like to say this because it's so important. Don't suffer in silence. If you have to phone a crisis line, you want to make sure that you do not suffer in silence. And We do deserve to have a good life, and I mean, I just don't think enough people know this, especially being abused as children. If we're not told that we deserved better, that we deserved a good life. Generally, our abusers would have told us the exact opposite. So, as adults, we have to realize that we do deserve to have a good life. We do deserve to feel good about ourselves. We deserve to heal and move on and move forward, and we can't unless we reach out. So I just hope that you will all reach out and get some help, whether it's calling a crisis line, calling a friend, getting involved with a counselor or therapist, just talking to somebody, right? Make sure you do reach out and get some help. Don't suffer in silence, right? Take care, everybody. Have a great day, and we'll be talking to you real soon. Bye-bye.